I was 12 years old when my biological father broke my arm and laughed. Victor Langford showed up at our trailer unannounced on a Tuesday afternoon, reeking of cheap whiskey, 3 years of silence trailing behind him like smoke. I hadn't even asked for much. I just wanted to know why he never sent the child support money Mom had begged for, the money that would have meant new shoes instead of cardboard stuffed into cracked soles. His face changed when I asked, something twisted behind his eyes. He grabbed my left arm with both hands, yanked it sideways, and twisted until I heard the crack. The sound was dry and sharp, like a branch snapping off a dead tree. I screamed. He laughed once, short, cold, the sound of someone swatting a fly, and dropped my arm like it was garbage. "You're nothing to me, kid," he said. Then he walked out the door without looking back. I lay on the linoleum floor, gasping, arm pulled to my chest, tears and snot running together. The pain was enormous, but the words were worse. That night I made myself a promise in the dark. I would never be nothing again. 23 years passed. After grinding through my CPA and CFE certifications while working nights, I built myself into something Victor never expected. At 35, I was a forensic accountant in a sleek Atlanta office, quietly respected for unraveling corporate fraud others missed. My left forearm still bent slightly where the bone had healed wrong. Most days I forgot it was there. Then the email arrived. Subject line, "Your father isn't who you think." The attachment was a single photograph. Victor, older now, gray at the temples but still polished and handsome, shaking hands with a city councilman at a charity gala. The caption read, "He's built an empire on other people's money." I stared at that image until my coffee went cold and the office emptied around me. I hadn't thought about Victor Langford in years. I'd worked hard not to. But seeing his easy, consequence-free smile made my left arm ache for the first time in a decade. I closed my laptop, then I opened it again and started searching. I drove to Pine Hollow on a Saturday, telling myself it was just curiosity, just closure. The mountain town was smaller than I expected. A main street, a hammer store, a diner with a hand-painted sign, nothing remarkable. Then I reached the town square and stopped walking. A brass plaque on a gleaming brick building caught the sunlight. Langford Community Center, donated by Victor and Marissa Langford. I stood there for a long time. Something hot and sharp moved through my chest. I went inside. The building was bright and well kept, full of framed photos and donor plaques and the smell of fresh paint. And there was Victor, older, heavier in the face, dressed in a collared shirt, working the room like a natural, laughing, slapping backs, every inch the generous community pillar. I watched him for 2 full minutes from across the lobby. He never saw me. I made sure of that. I walked back to my car and sat with my hands on the steering wheel, breathing slowly. I wasn't ready to confront him, but I was absolutely ready to dig. Back in Atlanta, I stayed late every night for 2 weeks pulling public records. Victor owned 3 LLCs, a chain of consulting firms with vague names and minimal web presence, and a board seat on a regional development nonprofit. On the surface, it looked clean, a successful, small-town businessman giving back. Nothing a quick search would flag. Then I found the first crack. A state housing grant, $2.1 million, awarded 3 years ago to one of Victor's companies for affordable housing development. I searched the project address on satellite maps. Empty lot, overgrown with weeds and scattered trash. $2.1 million. Not a single foundation poured. I laid the documents across my kitchen table and stood over them in the quiet apartment. My hands were steady. The old fracture didn't ache. This wasn't pain anymore. This was purpose. I whispered to the empty room, "You didn't disappear, Victor. You just changed costumes." The second email arrived 2 weeks later. The sender gave a name, Carla Reyes. She said she'd worked for Victor's bookkeeper in 2018 and had proof he'd routed grant money into offshore accounts. She would share everything, but only if I guaranteed anonymity. We met at a roadside diner halfway between Atlanta and Pine Hollow. She was mid-40s, small, watchful, hands wrapped tight around her coffee cup. She told me Victor fired her when she asked questions. Her car was keyed a week later, her apartment broken into, files taken. She'd stayed quiet for years. Then I saw your name on an old court document. You're his son, aren't you? I nodded once. She slid a USB drive across the table. Everything's on there. Every transaction, every transfer. Use it wisely. Her hands were still shaking when she picked up her coffee again. I understood why. Victor had a long reach for a small-town man.
I drove home with the USB in my jacket pocket and plugged it in at midnight. 4 years of records. Cooked ledgers, forged signatures, emails between Victor and Darren Holt, a disbarred lawyer running a Delaware shell company. The emails were casual, arrogant. Victor called his methods creative. Auditors were amateurs. Then, one email stopped me cold. Victor to Darren. The kid from my first marriage is probably still broke and bitter. Good riddance. I read it twice. Then I walked to the kitchen window and stood in the dark looking at the Atlanta skyline until my breathing evened out. My left arm pulsed with the old ache. He'd dismissed me twice, once to my face, once in words he never thought I'd read. I went back to my desk and kept working. I was going to make sure he said it in front of the whole world. I submitted an anonymous tip to the state auditor's office. Enough detail to trigger an inquiry, nothing to expose me or Carla. Precision and patience. I'd built my career on both. Nearly a year of quiet waiting passed. Then the local news ran a short item, Pine Hollow Development Grant under review. Victor responded fast. He posted a smooth video on the community center's Facebook page, shaking his head with practiced sadness, calling it politically motivated, thanking neighbors for loyalty, smiling the whole time. I watched it 4 times in a row. His smile never reached his eyes. Not once. I knew that smile from the day he walked out of our trailer, and I'd never forgotten what lived behind it. The mask was slipping. I intended to pull it off completely, and I was nowhere close to done. The call I never expected came on a Thursday evening. A private investigator reached out on behalf of Marissa Langford, Victor's wife. She'd found old toddler photos of me in a locked storage unit. When she saw my name tied to the auditor inquiry on public records, she connected the dots. I met her at a park 2 hours from Pine Hollow. She arrived alone, tired from carrying a secret too long. "He told me you didn't want contact," she said quietly. "I believed him. I didn't know about your arm." Her voice broke. "I have 2 daughters with him, 14 and 16. If he's done what I think, I need to protect them." She handed me a second USB drive. "He's been hiding money from me too. Help me get out, and I'll help you finish this." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I took the drive. Marissa's files filled every gap. Victor had set up a charitable trust that looked legitimate, but funneled donations back to him through fake invoices from companies he secretly owned. Worse, non-profit funds paid his daughter's private school tuition and a vacation home outside Asheville. I sat with the documents spread out and felt something unexpected. Not just satisfaction, sorrow for 2 girls, 14 and 16, who didn't know their lives were built on stolen money. For Marissa, lied to just as completely as I once had been. This had started personal. It had grown larger. I called Marissa and promised. Her daughters would stay shielded, their names never in any of it. The revenge was protective now. I brought in Nadia, a former colleague turned white-collar crime journalist. Sharp, careful, she'd broken 2 major fraud stories. I trusted her. She spent months running the numbers independently. Then she called. It's enough, more than enough. Before the article dropped, I mailed Victor an unmarked envelope. 1 photo, 12-year-old me in a hospital cast, hollow eyes. No note, just the picture. 2 days later, my old cell rang, the number I'd kept for this. "You, whoever you are, stop," Victor said,
voice tight, smoothness gone. I let silence hang. "You already know who I am, Dad," I said softly. Then I hung up and waited. Nadia's article hit on a Tuesday. Headline: Beloved Pine Hollow philanthropist accused of embezzling millions in public funds. By noon, it spread to regional outlets. By evening, state news. The state froze Victor's accounts pending investigation. Angry donors swarmed the community center. His phone went dark for days. Then he held a press conference. Pressed shirt, steady voice, practiced words calling it a smear. But the camera caught his left hand trembling on the podium. The same hand that twisted my arm 23 years earlier. I watched on my laptop and felt no rage, just something quieter, final, like a tide going out for good.
Carla came forward publicly the next week. She sat before a local TV camera, calm and clear. Falsified reports, offshore transfers, the break-in after questions, dates, amounts, accounts. Hands steady now. She was the first domino. Others followed. A contractor stiffed $180,000 with contracts and unpaid invoices. A grant officer admitting under oath Victor pressured her to approve fraud, job on the line. Each voice built another wall. I tracked it all from Atlanta, checking for gaps. None. 13 years as a forensic accountant, I knew how to build cases with no exits. Victor's face on the news aged weekly, polish gone, fear in its place, something I recognized from long ago. The final blow came from the last place I expected. Darren Holt, Victor's silent partner, facing his own federal charges, chose cooperation over a decade inside. He handed prosecutors a recorded call. Victor laughed about hiding money through nonprofits, treating grant cash like a personal bonus. Then, casual, thinking no one important listened, that worthless kid I left behind probably never amounted to anything anyway. The recording leaked to the press. I listened alone late at night, city quiet outside. He'd dismissed me again, this time to hundreds of thousands. I sat with it a long time, then slept better than I had in years. The indictment landed on a Wednesday morning, 27 counts, wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, misappropriation of public funds. The community center, his name on the plaque, was seized for victim repayment, accounts frozen, firms dissolved. 15 years unraveled in one news cycle. Marissa filed for divorce that week, moved the girls to her sister's in Raleigh, untangling finances. A week later, she arranged a cafe meet outside Atlanta. They were cautious, polite. The older one had Victor's eyes, uncomfortable with it. The younger, 14, quiet, serious, asked straight, "Did he really break your arm?" I nodded. She stood and hugged me without words. I held on longer than intended. Victor took a plea rather than trial. 10 years, possibility of parole after 6. Sentencing day, I drove to Pine Hollow, sat last row, unseen. I needed to be there for me. The judge read impact statements. Carla's methodical, devastating, years of fear, financial ruin, silence's cost. The contractor on wiped-out family savings. When sentence hit, Victor's shoulders dropped, body lost its hold. Something crossed his face I'd never seen. Not full remorse, but shame, quiet, real. Too late. Not enough to undo, but something. I let myself feel it. Restitution built slowly, then momentum. I had no direct legal claim, but when a small whistleblower link to Ward came, I redirected every dollar to the restructured nonprofit, now honest, doing real work instead of pretend. That year I started mentoring young accountants from tough backgrounds, trailer park kids, broken home survivors doubting the system, teaching balance sheets, spotting hidden fraud, trusting instincts when numbers don't add up. I had more to give than I'd realized. The boy on the kitchen floor learned to count carefully. Now he taught others. 2 years post-sentencing, I bought a small cabin in North Georgia mountains. Mom visited that first summer. Hair fully gray, eyes still sharp and warm. Survivor's eyes.
We sat on the porch evenings, tea cooling, listening to trees. "You didn't let him win," she said. I looked at my left arm. In fading light, the crook barely showed. Years ashamed, then angry. Now, just part of me. "No," I said. "More than that, I didn't let him define me." She leaned her head on my shoulder briefly. We sat quiet long after. No need for words. Evening still, air, pine, and cold water. For the first time in memory, nothing hurt. Victor's name came off the community center that fall, renamed for a local teacher who'd spent 40 decades with Pine Hollow kids. Dedication drew the town. I watched live stream from my porch, coffee in hand, new dog asleep on my feet. Life grew unplanned ways. New friendships, a slow, honest relationship with someone who knew my full story. Evenings of dinner, laughter, integrity's quiet satisfaction. I never spoke publicly about Victor, never needed to. The record stood, truth told by those with standing. But late nights, I thought of the boy on the linoleum, 12, arm broken, door closing. I spoke to him through years. We made it, and we were never nothing. Broken bones heal stronger. Karma needs no cruelty, just time, patience, and someone to follow the numbers where they lead.